Have you ever looked back at a difficult moment in your life and thought, where did that actually come from? Not the event itself, the reaction, the way you shut down or exploded or disappeared, the way a certain kind of pressure sends you somewhere else entirely, somewhere irrational, somewhere you don't even fully recognize yourself. Most people write that off. Bad day, stress, just the way I am. But here's what psychology has started to understand with more and more clarity. A lot of the chaos adults experience on the outside is actually the echo of something that happened on the inside a very long time ago, before they even had words for it. What most people call personality quirks or emotional baggage has a more precise name, and that name has been hiding in plain sight for decades. Welcome back to Apex. Today we're going to go somewhere most videos don't take you. We're going to look at the hidden trauma behind the man-child, the buried wound that didn't just shape the boy, but followed him quietly all the way into adulthood, disguised as laziness, arrogance, charm, or fear. And if you've already watched our video on the psychology of the man-child, this is the part we didn't tell you yet. This is the root. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Most men who exhibit man-child behavior didn't grow up in homes where they were neglected in the obvious sense. In fact, many of them grew up in homes where they were over-attended to. Homes where a parent, usually a mother, though not always, gave them an extraordinary amount of protection, praise, and emotional energy. On the surface, that sounds like a good thing. But beneath the surface, something else was happening. The developmental psychologist D.W. Winnicott introduced a concept called the good enough mother, the idea that healthy child development doesn't require a perfect parent. It actually needs a parent who occasionally frustrates the child, who allows small failures, who lets the child experience discomfort and then helps them navigate through it. That friction is not damage. That friction is growth. But when a parent, out of genuine love or out of their own unresolved anxiety, removes every obstacle, rescues the child from every failure, and makes sure the child never truly sits with discomfort, something goes wrong in development that isn't immediately visible. The child never learns how to tolerate reality. And that, right there, is the seed. Because reality is inconvenient. Reality is imperfect. Reality asks you to fail before you succeed, to earn what you want, to wait, to be rejected, to sit with uncertainty and keep moving anyway. A child who is never allowed to practice any of that grows into an adult who genuinely cannot tolerate it, not because he's weak, but because he was never given the chance to build that muscle. Now here is where it gets deeper, and this is the part most conversations skip entirely. The trauma behind the man-child is often not the trauma of too little. It is frequently the trauma of too much in the wrong direction. Psychoanalysts call it enmeshment. It happens when the emotional boundary between a parent and a child becomes blurred, when the parent's emotional needs begin to flow into the child's role in the household, when the child unconsciously takes on the task of making the parent feel okay, being their source of joy, their proof that life was worth it, the thing that gives them pride when everything else feels hollow. When this happens, the child doesn't develop a clear sense of where he ends and other people begin. He becomes extraordinarily sensitive to the emotional weather of the people around him. He learns to perform. He learns to be what others need him to be in order to keep the peace, to keep the love flowing, to avoid the particular silence or look or withdrawal that tells him something is wrong. And here is the brutal irony. The child who was told he was special, gifted, destined, that child often received that message not simply because the parent believed it, but because the parent needed it to be true. The child's greatness was the parent's proof of their own significance, which means the child never truly owned his identity. It was on loan. And somewhere deep down, he always knew it, which is why, as an adult, he panics every time life asks him to put that identity on the line. Every job application, every commitment, every hard conversation where he might be revealed as ordinary, it does not feel like just a small risk. It feels like annihilation. That terror, that's not personality. That's an old wound dressed in adult clothing. But enmeshment is only one layer. There's another type of childhood wound that produces man-child behavior, and it looks completely different from the outside. This is the wound of the absent father. And by absent, I don't just mean physically gone. Emotional absence counts just as powerfully. The father who was in the home but never truly present. The father who came home exhausted and disappeared into the television. The father who didn't know how to be close, who never sat down with his son and showed him what it looked like to carry difficulty with dignity. The father is, in the psychology of development, the one who introduces the child to the principle of reality. The mother's role is warmth, safety, nourishment, the world as fundamentally loving. The father's role is boundaries, structure, consequence. The world is something that requires effort and respect. Both are necessary. They are not interchangeable. When the father is absent, whether physically or emotionally, the boy stays too long in the first world, the world of the mother, the world of warmth without demands, and without a model of masculinity that shows him what it looks like to do hard things steadily, to fail without falling apart, to be responsible without losing himself. He goes looking for that model everywhere. In characters on screens, in fantasies, in older men who happen to enter his life. Or he stops looking and fills the gap with distraction instead. And then there's a third wound, one that's even harder to name because it doesn't come from the family at all, or at least not directly. It comes from shame. Not the healthy kind of shame that signals you've crossed a value you care about, the other kind, the chronic, ambient kind. The kind that a boy absorbs when he is consistently made to feel that who he is, fundamentally, is a problem. Too sensitive, too emotional, too much. Not tough enough, not disciplined enough, not what a man is supposed to be. This can come from a harsh or dismissive father, from bullying, from a cultural environment that communicates over and over again that softness in a boy is weakness, and weakness is unforgivable. When a boy receives this message long enough, something happens to his inner world. He splits. He builds a public self, a performance designed to seem fine, to seem capable, to never let anyone see the place where he is fragile, and he buries the real self deeper and deeper until even he can't find it. And here's how this connects to the man-child pattern. The man-child pattern is very often the public self refusing to grow up, because growing up means taking off the armor. It means being seen. It means putting yourself into situations where real judgment is possible, where real failure is possible, where someone might finally confirm the thing the boy always feared, that he was never enough to begin with. So he keeps the armor on. He keeps the provisional life going. He stays in the zone of potential and avoidance, because in that zone, the verdict never has to come in. 3 very different wounds, an enmeshed childhood, an absent father, a foundation of shame, and yet all 3 lead to the same psychological destination, a man who is genuinely afraid of fully inhabiting his own life. Now, if you recognized yourself in any of those 3 origins, what do you do with that? Because here is where a lot of people go wrong. They discover the wound and they use it as an explanation that becomes a permanent excuse. The wound happened, the wound was real, but the wound does not get to be the final word on who you become. Here is what actually helps. The first step is to grieve honestly, not to perform grief, not to become obsessed with the story of your childhood, but to sit with the real acknowledgement that something did happen to you that shouldn't have, that you didn't receive what you deserved, that you carried something heavy before you were big enough to know you were carrying it. Let that be true. Don't rush past it. Don't rationalize it away with, but other people had it worse. It's allowed to have been hard. That grief is not self-pity. It is accuracy. The second step is to separate the wound from your identity. You are not the child who was enmeshed. You are not the boy who lost his father. You are not the kid who was told you were too soft. Those things happened to you. They are not the totality of what you are. And the moment you begin to see the difference between the wound and the self, you gain something you didn't have before, a place to stand that is separate from the story.
The third step is to find what you were not given and give it to yourself. If you never had a father who modeled steady responsibility, find that model now, in a mentor, in a community, in the books and stories of men who figured it out. If you were never allowed to fail safely, create environments where failure is small and survivable, and practice failing anyway. If you were drowned in praise that was conditional on performance, find ways to experience your own worth that aren't tied to what you produce.
And the fourth step, possibly the hardest, is to let someone actually see you. Not the performance, not the version of you that holds everything together. The real one, the one that's still working things out. Because one of the deepest consequences of the childhood wounds we described is a profound sense of aloneness. The feeling that if anyone truly saw what was inside, they would leave. That is the wound talking. That is not the truth. Real connection with a close friend, a therapist, a partner who has earned it, is often what finally begins to dissolve the armor from the inside. None of these steps happen in a weekend. None of them make the past disappear. But they do something the provisional life never could. They make the present real. There's a line from the writer James Baldwin that cuts very deep. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. The man-child pattern is not a character flaw. It is a strategy that once made sense in a childhood context and has simply outlasted its usefulness. The boy who used avoidance to survive a complicated home did what he had to do, but you are not that boy anymore, and you are standing in a life that needs you to show up differently. The wound came first, but what you do with it from here, that part is yours. If this video spoke to something you've been carrying quietly for a long time, hit like and subscribe so Apex can keep going deeper into the psychology that most places won't touch. And if someone in your life is still trapped in the pattern and hasn't yet found the language for why, send this to them. Sometimes the right words at the right moment are the beginning of everything. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.